Okay, so now we are ready to do the retargeting. I have a file and I have some mocap data here. I will simply go to the character control window and under my character one, which is the target, I'll go to blue box, source, and source, which is my other character, right? So right now it's being controlled by the control rig, but if I want it to do the retargeting, I'll just change it to source. So let's just stop and take a couple of seconds to look at what Maya has done. The first thing is we look at the UI. We see that our UI has changed, right? The FK rig is all gone and all I'm seeing are my effectors. If I want to show these, they are still there, right? I'll see my UI here, my perspective window, that my control rig is still there. It doesn't really control my source, but I can still go ahead and move things around, which is your first indication that before you start tweaking your mocap, it's probably better to do all the properties and set it up correctly and do the baking. Because if I start, for example, selecting my effector, I can easily move it around, right? And then as long as I don't press any key, everything behaves properly. But you got to remember the control rig has no key whatsoever now. So if I start setting a key on it, the solver right away will start, see, completely misbehaving. So the input on the skeleton will now no longer really be the source, so no longer be the mocap. So it's really best practice here to set up your HIK, set up your properties, and then do the baking and then do the tweaking. So in order to set all the different settings, we'll go to character, edit properties. I've clicked on do here, so I have no more animation and no more keyframe. Oops, sorry, I didn't press undo, no. Right, there you go. So now I've pressed undo, so I am back to where I was. So I'll go to my character control window and character and edit properties. This is where the properties for the solver really come in. And for those people that are used to Motion Builder, a lot of this is going to be familiar to you, if not all of it. We have match source, we have retarget specific options here. So match source, the action space, the mirror animation, the hip level, so on and so forth. We have the reach, we have the pull, we have the stiffness, we have solving. So we have a lot of options here. And it's really best to start with two characters that are more or less similar in size. So we do notice here that my two characters are more or less the same height. So if I just take my reference and move it, right, we see the two skeletons are quite similar. So I can take my reference and start it. And if I move it aside, I can also put some keyframes on it and animate it and give it a separate path, right? We'll see that the retargeting works perfectly well. I'll go back to my edit properties, and just for this, I'm going to copy the tab and I'm going to put it here so that we can keep the control window and the options available. Okay, so obviously match source is something that will match the character. It will disregard the reference node and simply put it into its place. Action space comp mode, mirror animation, right? If I put mirror animation to on, we see that it's mirroring each other. The hip level is also something that's quite obvious. Hip level, if I put it to user and I'll put it to -10, we'll see that the hip moved down, right, or up. The feet spacing is the same thing. We can go quite wide or quite close, and all this will be carried throughout the animation. The ankle height is the same thing, right? And again, I'll just show the grid here. We see that, for example, my skeleton is quite above the grid. So I can go ahead and change the ankle height. Right? If you're going to do something like this, I'll put it -5, yeah. It's probably a good idea to bring in the floor contacts, right? So that it doesn't go through the grid. And unlike FBIK and unlike Motion Builder, Maya doesn't give us any kind of visual representation of the floor contact. So I'll take off my grid. You'll see there's nothing, right? In Motion Builder and especially in FBIK, the floor contact had these little, these little points. But in Human IK right now, there's nothing. Hopefully we will with time. Right now there's nothing. We do have all the options for the feet and for the hands, right? So it's really good to start and playing with these. I'll put the match source to on, and we'll see, for example, that the hand and the wrist are quite different. So I can take the reach and start playing here with the left wrist and the left elbow to kind of get the animation that I want. I can do the right wrist and the right shoulder and the right elbow. And so these are really the same kind of reach that we were seeing here, right? It's how much it's going to follow that particular node. Here we had an FKIK. This is it's different in the sense that, this is it's 0 or 1. So it's kind of the same value. It's still reaching for something. It's still reaching for, in this case, not an IK, but a position. So it's kind of similar. You have options for every single joint. And we have options for solving. So there's quite a bit of stuff here that we could go through. A lot of it is just very advanced. I would think most of it will be all the retargeting specific, the reach, and the floor contact, right? So we can go ahead and start playing with this and start getting some of the animation that we want to get, something that looks really good for our character. Okay, so once we have that, once we're happy with it, we're going to start baking. So let's stop for now and let's pick up and look at the baking options.